Welcome everyone to Emergent Essence Dynamics. This is our EED webinar number 7, and the title is Masks, Boundaries, and Sacred Space on April 1st, 2020. And we have lots of lovely people joining us today. I'm so glad that everybody was able to make it. I'm sure you had nothing better to do. Or maybe you had lots to do and you're taking time out. So I really appreciate that you're here. So this is scheduled to be an hour, but I guarantee you this will go over an hour. So for those of you, because I have jam-packed a lot of material in here. So for those of you that have to leave at the top of the hour or before, don't apologize. You wish, put in the chat window, gotta go, and take your leave. I'm estimating this one might go to about 90 minutes if I give it the proper time due, okay? Unless you want me to barrel through it, rush. I mean, because I'm sure you want comments and questions throughout. So I'm just telling you that ahead of time, because once I prepared all the slides, I realized, no, this isn't going to fit in 60 minutes. So I'm willing to go over. If you're willing to stay, I'm happy to have you here. I know many of you attending and those listening to the recording, you can be coaches, maybe you're leaders or consultants, or facilitators, maybe healers. But all in all, why I chose to do this is because we're human beings, all right? And right now, literally, we're getting our boundaries tested. And literally, people are wearing masks out on the street, all right? And so I thought, well, this is appropriate to see, because we need borders, boundaries, masks in our relationships. But we have to have a good relationship with those masks and boundaries in order to have a healthy relationship itself. And so I'm covering material here that in some ways may challenge the ways you think about your relationships and boundaries and the dynamics involved. Maybe it won't. But I'm going to be giving you a very specific tool that helps you map everything out so you get clarity, all right? I mean, when we think of masks and boundaries, we think, well, I need a mask to cover myself, or maybe I'm hiding, or I need to protect myself. Like from what? From an invader? That's why you need a boundary, to protect from an invader. That may be true, but it's also fear-based. When we ground ourselves in resilience, we have a completely different relationship to what masks and boundaries are for. And that's what we're going to be looking into. I'm sure, because we're all basically in self-isolation right now. So we're experiencing a different way of connecting to others and a different way of connecting to ourselves. Some people are going nuts and other people are just loving it, okay? So we're actually all being forced to discover, well, who am I? Who am I when I'm with myself? Do I define myself through my relationships, through my connections? What's it like when I'm disconnected or isolated? So this gets us to discover our sacred space and sacred self. And I'll explain what those are in a minute. Also, when we think of masks, when we see someone wearing a mask, we think, oh, you're not being authentic. You're hiding from me. You're trying to deceive me. You're covering yourself up. Well, really, I mean, it depends. I mean, a mask is a mask, just like a knife is a knife. It's neither good nor bad. It is how we use it and what we use it for. It's the intention behind it. And that's what we're going to look at. Because masks are part of who we are. We all play roles. We all wear masks. And with boundaries, I mean, just a few weeks ago, they were promoting open borders, don't do populism and nationalism, open the borders. Now everyone has closed the borders. So, and we do this in our relationships as well. We let everyone through the front door, or suddenly we lock the front door. How do we manage that? These are some of the questions we're looking at. So, the way EED works is it's all based upon resilience. We're neutralizing fear and power struggles in order to get a baseline of resilience, meaning our core vitality, our basic life force, our ability to adapt and be flexible without feeling threatened or like we're going to be harmed, because when we are resilient, we bounce back. We have an undying will and limitless creativity from resilience. And when we build ourselves from the ground up, from a resilient foundation, and are congruent with that, that shifts our relationship to everything, including our masks and boundaries. And so what we're doing here is showing you how can you align your essence, which is the foundation of your resilience, with your masks and boundaries, so you can be congruent and function in a healthy way in the outer world. So this whole webinar is about how to organize your relationship space to be healthy and resilient. That's basically why I chose to do this topic. Any comments on what I've said so far, how you relate to that, or any questions that come up? Or is it a big thumbs up and let's move on? Okay. All right. Okay, so here we go. What are we discovering? I did introduce, but here's concretely what we're discovering. I'm giving you an overview of an EED tool. It's where we map out our relationships, and it's called Relationship Rings. And I'm going to show you how this tool helps clarify your masks, your boundaries, and defining what your sacred space is, and how that all works together. And I will define sacred space shortly. This will give you practical ways to differentiate your levels of intimacy in relationship. We do not have to have the same level of intimacy with everyone, okay? And this will help us reconcile who we are with our masks. Who am I behind the mask? Who is the mask? What is that for? A lot of people feel a separation from that. So a lot of people think, well, I need to get rid of my mask. Or a lot of people say, you shouldn't ever see who I really am. And neither of those are going to work. It's when we reconcile all the versions of ourselves together to a central essence that then we have more power and liberated choice, right? And then this also will give you tips for recognizing boundaries based upon fear or false values. We will look a little bit into false values later. And then how do you establish clear boundaries from a resilient place? Clean and clear boundaries. So this tool can help you completely redefine everything. And this will be great for you. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't catch you, really.
I mean, when I was
Hi.
to do this thing at Blenheim,
Hi.
Hi. If you have, did you have a question or comment? Because I heard sound coming through. It may have been somebody's background.
No, I just joined, so I'm gonna mute my audio so I can listen to you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Just from my understanding, so you're saying that we can use the tool to find out where our masks in relationships are and kind of reconcile them together with our essence?
Yeah.
Become more coherent being overall.
So we are a more coherent and congruent being, yes. And so that we know there's a time and place for this and that version of myself, and I don't have to feel like a fraud, okay? Or I don't have to try and measure up to some version of what I think it is to be authentic, okay? Certain masks, oh, that's not authentic. And then there's other roles I play, well, that's not authentic. And so what that can do is create an inner conflict within ourselves. And so we don't really know who we are. We think I'm only one version of myself. That's not true. If you guys think about it, who you are today showing up in this webinar, when you look at the screen at everybody, including me, is very different than if you look away from your computer over to your kids or out the window or you see somebody on the street. You are actually having a shift of personality, whether you notice it or not. Somebody else walks in the room, you are going to be a different person in relationship to them. When you go back to work, you're in different relationship with people out in the street. So this is what we're going to look at. And how can you clearly delineate and differentiate all those things? So yeah, thank you for muting yourselves to cut out any background noise. I'm hearing some noise in my background, unfortunately, because the garbage truck is coming my way, so I'll close the window. You see, Paris is not completely shut down. They're still doing the garbage. Hey, garbage collection, yay. So if you have comments or questions, feel free to jump right in. Unmute yourself, jump in with your comment or question. I don't mind. Don't feel like you're interrupting me. You're not. And I will take a pause to ask for comments, questions, which I will do right now. Any comments or questions on what we're covering?
Yeah, I have a comment, or I just wanted to share something about my masks. Like sometimes when I'm with other people, I feel that I'm becoming less authentic. That's how I judge it. And I feel like pain in my body, and I'm not sure if it is because of my own judgment that I'm being inauthentic, or if I'm giving away a part of myself, like overstepping my own boundaries by playing this mask. Just something I'm curious.
Right. So we're going to talk about this polarity. I'm hearing an inner polarity of like, is it this? Is it that? It has nothing to do with them. This has to do with your relationship to yourself, reconciling yourself with your own mask. So I'm going to show you ways. How do you navigate through that so that you can reconcile? Okay. By the end of the webinar, you're going to get all the information. Okay. So I'm not going to get into an explicit answer, but that's a great question to put out there, okay? Because authenticity plays big time in this, okay? Anyone else? Okay. So briefly, I'm going to explain what EED does. For those of you that have attended the webinars before, you've heard this. But each time I explain it, it's a little different. And for those joining the recording or the webinar for the first time, this will be new information for you. So emergent essence dynamics is dealing with everything in relationship, and it applies to coaching, leadership, anything to do with human dynamics, okay? Where we're coming from here is that everything happens in relationship. Nothing happens in isolation. And all relationships are following a unique fractal pattern. A fractal meaning it's a repeating pattern at the both large and the small scale. And that is affecting everything. So when we want to work with transformation, we're not focusing so much on the person or the issue or the relationship. We're focusing more on what are the patterns happening, and then we can start shifting the patterns. It's the pattern that drives both the person and the issue. So emergent essence dynamics developed a universal model that is pinpointing the fundamental patterns driving our human dynamics. And so this whole webinar is going to show you some of those elements of how these human dynamics are working, okay, as it relates to our masks and our boundaries. So what we do is before we transform anything, we are focusing on resilience. Again, I explained resilience earlier. That's that innate ability to bounce back, to create, that will to live, that core vitality. We're not going to base transformation on fear. That means if we jump into transformation too fast and we don't have a resilient foundation, we may be steering the transformation off track, or fear might be driving the whole process. So first, we're establishing resilience to neutralize most of the fear. Any fear that remains is actually part of the dynamic pattern. And so what we want to do is reveal those core patterns. And it's not through what people talk about, it's how people behave and the energies that they connect with. It's what they do. So this is about what are you showing me as opposed to what are you telling me? Okay, and that will become important later as we go through this relationship rings tool. Then what we can do is once we're in a resilient space, we can shift all those patterns. If we shift the core pattern at play affecting pretty much everything, then that person and multiple issues transform. Don't get too hung up on what's the root pattern. It will always reveal itself because it's always present. Right? So EED allows you to go through very layers and layers and layers and layers, okay? And what you're actually doing is just moving from fractal to fractal to fractal. Everything just starts repeating. And as you get used to working with EED, you realize everything is working in cycles and repeating patterns. Therefore, you can never get lost and confused. because you're basically going around the same wheel. Any comments or questions there before I move on? Okay, so I'm showing you a very specific tool that we use, all right? So in the process, this may challenge some myths and taboos that we hold about ourselves and our relationships. So for example, like I used to supervise a lot of coaches and used to train them. And one common thing that was going around was, well, do I need to be completely vulnerable and transparent in order to be authentic? Meaning, in order to be authentic, I have to take my mask off and wear my heart in my sleeve. Is that what it means to be authentic? Okay. Well, then we need to challenge, well, what is authenticity and what is vulnerability? Do the two relate, or are they separate things? I mean, how are they interconnecting? Because that question above collapses the two together. It says, I need to be vulnerable in order to be transparent, in order to be authentic. Okay. That means I have to have no masks and no boundaries. Does that sound realistic? Or what is your immediate response to that? And we don't have to get into a long discussion. I just want to put these out on the table, pepper it in.
No, I don't think it has to go together, authenticity and vulnerability.
I think it's important to differentiate them, all right? Another one, well, what if my masks and my boundaries conflict with my values? I see you laughing there, Kirsten. What's going on? No response.
I'm just like, I think that's another, so also vulnerability and values and all the things you put on yourself are sometimes the highest protective masks you use, especially when you are in that helper scene.
Yeah.
It's so hip to be vulnerable and but for me sometimes it lacks the other side, like showing the strength and
right. Well, actually, we've got a
brilliant. So that's why I'm laughing, because you put the finger in the
eye.
I don't know how it is in English. You put it there.
Nail on the head.
Yeah.
Okay, nailed it. Okay, yes, because there is now, even amongst this whole personal growth industry, it's like, oh, you got to be vulnerable and you got to wear your heart in your sleeve in order to be authentic, but you have to stand up and be a warrior, and that's against my values, right? But now that's showing a strong shield, mask or a boundary, but I have a value of this, but I have a value of that. It's creating an inner conflict, that in itself. And if we get too indoctrinated in it, we will lose sense of who we are. So this must be challenged. So what do we need to challenge is, well, where are my values coming from, really? We all have values, but where are they coming from? It's coming from fear. Is it coming from someone else? Is it coming from me? So we need to be able to take a good look at that. The other one is, like I mentioned, so how do I stand up and say no in order to protect myself? To protect my values, to respect my boundaries, et cetera, to respect my vulnerability. Well, then we could ask another question. Do I really need to stand up? And what am I really protecting? So we need to check this stuff out, because if it's fear-based, it might all seem very clear. Well, I need to protect this and that, and therefore I have to stand up. But if we enter a resilient space, suddenly we may think, oh, I don't even need to protect that because that's a permanent part of me. So you can't even take it away. So therefore, I don't even need to worry about that part of myself. Here's something more sacred that I actually could be giving more attention to. It helps prioritize. And there are more ways to create a boundary than standing up and fighting, okay? We don't necessarily have to stand up and fight, okay? And that'll become clear a little bit later. Sometimes you do need to fight. Sometimes you do need to defend. But if that's a trigger reaction, we may be closing up our options. So before I move on to the next slide, any comments or questions here? Is anyone triggered? Or is anyone elated? Or in between? If it's all okay, just give me a thumbs up, or we'll see. I just scroll through. It's thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, great, great, great. You're all beautiful. Okay. So moving on. So now this is about navigating our space of relationship. So we have 3 ways here of being in relationship. So on this level, we're each operating, if we're in relationship, we're each operating in a closed reality or closed bubble. And this is where we're going to hold rigid masks and very tight boundaries. All right. You cannot cross this line, because this means I'm protecting myself. Do not invade me. But I want to be in connection with you. Therefore, agree with me or conform to my values, or I need to give up my values in order to fit with you. This is about agreement, disagreement. This is the world of duality and opposition. All right. And the more inflexible and rigid we are, the more conflict we're going to meet, or we're going to be more and more in isolation until we find people that are in agreement with us. Now, I'm making very strong statements, but I'm saying that's the archetype of this level, okay? The closed bubble reality. Now, we can drop into a more resilient state, and therefore we don't have to be so sealed into our reality. We are able to look beyond our bubble into someone else's reality, and we're able to receive back in influence to our own reality. And this is where we get an exchange of information. And so what we're doing is we're expanding our sphere to include more things around us, as opposed to up here where we really are only interacting with our own ideas of the world around us, all right? This we can call the dream reality. This is where we're more fluid, okay? So there still are polar opposites, but now they can become complementary, and they can work together as opposed to in opposition. Black and white can work together to create a range of degrees of light. Hot and cold can work together to create a range of temperature, okay? Up in this world, it's either hot or cold, or something else, warm. But it's only got one room for one truth, and that one truth is going to compete with the other truth. Here, the 2 truths can start working together to create a larger reality. And here, this is the world of essence, where it's total unity, where each side, there's no longer a side. We're all encompassing. This is all potential. And now we can be fluid to move really anywhere and everywhere, because there is unity, oneness, etc. Now, that doesn't mean that everything collapses into a singularity. This means it is a oneness that embraces all diversity, and all paradoxes can be reconciled. Now, that's an ideal place to be, and we don't live there. But that is a place we can access. The place we really live is here or here, and we toggle back and forth. This is our source connection that can build the dream and build the game reality that we're living, okay? Now, how does that relate to our masks and our boundaries? So, masks are really a function. A mask is a role that you're playing. It enables you to function in the world. The mask is not who you are. It's only a facet of who you are. So what's important to know is, what is my mask? What's its function? And who am I behind it? And how are the 2 working together? All right? So I may wear a mask at work where I need to be whipping people into shape, and I can't tolerate their excuses. Okay, that does not mean, but at home, I'm so nurturing and loving to my kids, and I'll hold them as they cry when they get a boo-boo. But if I do that at work, nobody's going to get anything done, because it's a high stakes environment. Therefore, I really have to crack the whip. So I'm going to play a role and a mask. Now, if I can reconcile that I've got a heart still behind that mask, even a bleeding heart behind that mask, but I also know my job, my function, what I have to do, I'm going to pull out various strengths in myself to be able to crack the whip still maintain my compassion, but I'm not going to let someone play my heartstrings in order to get away with bullshit. Does this make sense what I'm saying or not? Okay. Because otherwise, I may experience cognitive dissonance when I go to work and when I go home, because I don't know who I am. So that's why it's important to know your masks and know who you are behind them, okay? Now, boundaries are not about separation. They are about organizing your relationship space, and that will become clear in a moment when I show you the tool. So boundaries help us determine levels of intimacy in our relationships and the function of the relationship, and how am I functioning in the relationship? How are you functioning in the relationship? That's what the boundaries are for. Boundaries are not about creating disconnection or closing people off. It's really about setting conditions of behavior between us so there is mutual respect and so there is mutual health, all right? So it's important that you know the conditions of each boundary you set and why that boundary is there. What is the function of this relationship? How much intimacy is permitted or not permitted? Because if that changes, it changes the function of the relationship. Is this making sense? Yes, no, thumbs up, or? Okay, great. Now, your sacred self, this is the yourself, the you. If you could take off all your masks, and I'm going to take you through a short visualization to discover this. Who are you behind all your masks, all right? It's the version of you behind the very thinnest mask you could ever have. Why am I saying that? Because even when you're in relationship with yourself, you're actually still projecting a mask towards yourself because you have thoughts about yourself. So the sacred self is your essence just behind that thinnest veil. And you may never, ever really get to know what that is, but you may get to know what it is, all right? Now, hold on, I just turned off something. I had a pot of water boiling and I forgot about it. So here's the good news. Nobody can truly penetrate your sacred self. It's absolutely safe because it's your essence. It's like if somebody tried to reach in, they couldn't even touch it. It's like moving their hand through water. It's not tangible. It's permanent. So that's the one thing to know about the sacred self. It actually doesn't need the barriers because it's just intangible to others. So we wear masks in order to create roles in the world we live in, and it's a way to manage our world. So what is your sacred space? That's the immediate space around your sacred self. It's like your VIP room. It's for very important people. Now you choose who has access to your sacred space. Nobody else chooses who has access. I cannot demand to say, Kirsten, I demand to be in your sacred space. I look at all the things I did. I belong there. How dare you? Shame on you for not letting me in after everything I've done. Now, if you're not feeling very resilient, if you're feeling fearful, or if you buy into the shame I'm putting upon you, you might think, oh my God, yeah, I should be letting you in. Well, who's having control of your sacred space now? Me. I have no right to do that. Everyone has their own sacred space, and it's your divine right to be the master of that space. Nobody else controls it but you. So you can make demands. There are deal breakers, and it's all to do with well-being in that space. You know what that space is. You determine the well-being. You determine the conditions of who has access, okay? And you can even choose that nobody's in that space. It's just you. Comments or questions here on what I've laid out here? Or are we still all good?
Yeah, I have one comment.
Yeah.
Like, I noticed that especially in like the spiritual community, there's like always this prompting of you have to open up, you have to have less boundaries and let everyone in and be open to the world and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, let's look at it through this map. They may be talking to you from here, or if you're feeling that from here and they're saying you have to open all your boundaries and that's going to feel terrifying. If you can drop into a more resilient space where you have a connection to your sacred self, you can start gradually opening certain things, receiving certain things, opening, receiving. Here's where you'll have more acceptance and you can have more fascination with things. But in the end, and sure, you're gonna learn a lot, but in the end, it does not mean that it becomes a rule now where you have to be an open book, because sometimes you've got to jump back up into this space for certain roles you play. The trick is to keep a connection with this source being in all the roles and situations you find yourself in. And in order to keep assessing, to stay fluid and flexible in life, drop into this space to reassess. Oh, what's shifting in the relationship now? How is that at source? Oh, maybe we can change the game around a little bit. So this is about redefining ourselves in a more fluid and organic way. So sure, I can become more spiritual. But for that asshole of a neighbor, I mean, I can love them from source, but I'm still not inviting them into my house because I know they're a thief. And I'm just not willing to be stolen from. Until I progress to the point where I can have an open house and you can take whatever you want and I know I'll survive. Great, now I'm an open book. Does that, I know that's an extreme point, but does this help clarify a little bit more on the point you were making there, Amiel, or for anyone else? Is that okay for you guys? Yeah. Just give me a thumbs up. If you don't want to speak, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Good. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here just for you to discover your own sacred self, okay? So take a moment to just connect to yourself and to your body. If you wish, you can close your eyes. If you want to turn off your video, that's fine too. Just sink into yourself, okay? You can focus on your breath, your breathing. And throughout this visualization, just notice who you are in every situation and the kinds of masks that show up. What are the masks you wear as you interact with different people? And throughout, just notice and allow yourself to be fascinated with everything that comes up and then let it go. As you come upon each mask, allow yourself to experience it briefly and let it affect you. Take note of it and then just peel it away so you can notice what other masks begin to emerge as I walk you through this visualization. So who are you when you interact with strangers on the street? Notice what comes up. Let it affect you. Who are you when you interact with casual acquaintances, people you sort of know, but don't know so well? Who are you when you interact with friends in general, or with colleagues, people you work with? Who are you when you interact with the key people you work closely with? Who are you when you interact with close friends and best friends? Allow yourself to experience briefly whatever masks come up. Let it affect you. And then peel it away and let something else emerge. Who are you with your relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins? Who are you with your family, your immediate family? Parents, brothers, sisters, children. And who are you when you interact with your loved ones, those most immediate to you? And who are you with people that count the most in your life? And then, who are you when you interact with yourself, when no one is looking? Who are you with yourself just before you are going to sleep? Who are you when you are with yourself just as you are waking up from sleep? And now go into that very secret and sacred part of yourself that only you can see or experience. This is the version of you, this is the whole of you that is most vulnerable and sacred. It's the you that very, very few people can get a real glimpse of. Notice in yourself what it takes or demands of you to share this part of yourself. And notice what it takes for others to be able to see or experience this very facet of this sacred self. This is your sacred self. This is you with no mask. And you can choose to share this place with others or not at all. It is your choice. From this place of your sacred self, you can decide which masks you wear, knowing that despite any mask, you are always privately connected somehow, some way, to this sacred self. So both the mask and the sacred self are all a part of you. So enjoy that space. You can anchor it in yourself, whatever feels significant about your experience of your sacred self, if it was a sensation or a particular place in your body, or even a particular strength or quality. And then gradually come back. And that might mean that you put a few layers on top of it. Or maybe you open your eyes and see the world from your sacred self and engage. Love to hear from any of you what you noted from that experience or what it was like to work through these layers from the outside in. Any comments?
did strike me that me to myself is also wearing a mask. And my sacred self was yet something different.
Yeah, definitely. And you might even have various masks to yourself. There's a way you look at yourself in the mirror. There's a way you secretly think about yourself. Then there's, like I said, there's a version of you just before going to sleep. There's a version of you just before you wake up. And then as you go about your day. Any others? Have anything?
I'm curious to know, well, at least in my experience, I find it more triggering in a way, like it, like myself from with my close people, it's like I feel more fear.
Mm-hmm.
I feel more maybe vulnerable, and I get more triggered when there's people that's closer to me. When you talk about family, or when you talk to your about your loved one,
Mm-hmm.
that's people that's already crossing kind of like that boundary. Why do I feel fear, or why do I feel more protective? It's just a question, because that's what I identified in myself.
Great. Rather than make it a question of why is that happening? Oh my God. Or, just take note of it and put it to the side. Say, interesting. Okay. So when these people come too close, I'm feeling fear. All right. Because the next thing I'm going to show you is how do you map all that stuff out, and then how do you work with it so you can start to find your resilience in all of these situations. All right, and you can start to understand yourselves more. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to put up my defenses now when certain people get close. Okay, so what I want you to do is just take note of anything that came up. Don't do anything with it yet. Just let it be. It's more about acceptance, and then we can get fascinating. So for now, it is what it is. Then we can start getting fascinated about, okay, so how's that working? Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's available. Is that okay for you, Reedy?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, or is it all good? We can move on. Okay. I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, so here's the tool. Here's relationship rings. This is a map, all right? So what it's doing is it's putting everything in relationship to your sacred self, all right? So I've got your sacred self in the middle, and then you can see this blue ring around it. That's in a way the mask you have towards yourself. Then you have various spaces that radiate outward from the sacred self, each with their own boundaries, almost like a castle with a moat and another moat and another moat and another moat. So here's the space you can be in, that's your sacred space. And then outside of that is the space outside. And then another boundary, space further outside, space further outside. So the lines are representing the boundaries, and the space is the kind of masks you wear within those spaces, okay? So what we want to do then is we want to start mapping things onto these spaces. And we can go with 3 archetypal categories, like my family, my friends, and my professional people. You can look at everyone in your life, or just focus on some key portions. Maybe there's a particular project you're working on and you've got a team, or maybe just whatever you're working on in your life right now, certain people are involved. And what you're doing is you want to map them, place them on the map according to their proximity to your sacred self or to your sacred space. Where do they stand currently? It's not where you want them to be, it's where are they currently? And that's where you have to be very honest with yourself. Oh, my dad's way out here, but I'd really like him to be here. Well, you got to put him out there if that's where he is, okay? Now, maybe you have a lover. Okay, so I'm saying that maybe you have a spouse, maybe you also have a lover. Well, it all belongs on your map, okay? Maybe you're single and you just got lots of friends. Maybe you'd like a lover. Well, then maybe that's not going to be on your map. Or you know, so, and it's not just restricted to people. It can also be events, things coming up, or things of the past. Also, there could be people that are not currently alive, but they're still in relationship to you, okay? And they still feel important, that they belong. So you can put them on the map too. So this is not about, this can be events coming up in the future, events from the past, people from the past or future, but where does that all stand in relation to you now, okay? So what we want to do is arrange those people and events in relationship to our sacred space, okay? Then we can start drawing lines of where do I want them to be, and draw another dotted line, where do they want to be, or where do I sense that they want to be, okay? And this map, and I'll show you an example of a filled out map in a second here. This map then becomes a point of reference for yourself, and it's a catalyst to activate all the different dynamics happening around you and in your life, okay? And then we can start moving things around and shifting things around to see and test what really are your values, what really is your sense of sacred space, what really are your masks, what really are your boundaries, what really needs to be there, what really doesn't need to be there, what can be created. And you can start remapping everything, okay, from a central place of resilience. So here's what it might look like. Let's say, here's a map. So I used sort of an example from myself. I didn't include everyone, but let's say, so my family, so here's my mom and my dad. I've got my mom right on the edge of my sacred space. Got my dad one ring out, okay? And then maybe I've got my best friend here around the same place as my dad. Then I've got one friend that's way out there, and I've got another friend that maybe could be a lover, don't know yet. They're a little closer in. Then I got, say, some colleagues from work at different degrees, okay? And then I've got a project that I'm working on, or an event, a workshop, okay? And that's the one thing that's more into my sacred space than anything else, it's my work, okay? Well, that looks pretty static. But now let's look, where do I want them to move, okay? So I'd like my dad to come in more. I'd like my mom to stay in the same place. She's good. I'd like my work to come even further in. I'd like to bring this friend to be more intimate. I'd like to send that friend away. I'd like to move this friend maybe a little further out. I'd like to move that colleague a little further out, this one a little further in, so that they're basically on the same level. And I want to push this one way the hell away, all right? Now, where do they want to go? Oh boy, the friend that I'm trying to get rid of, push far away, is trying to get right in my space. The one that maybe could be a lover is actually moving away from me. My work is slipping away, way onto the outside. This colleague I want to push out, well, they'll push out a little bit. This one that I'm thinking, oh, we can balance that out here, they want to come in. This one that I want to bring in is just fine where they are. My mom wants to come right into my sacred self. And my dad, well, maybe he wants to come in, maybe he wants to move out. I don't know which way he's going. So are you guys seeing now, when we add these arrows, how this now can start to create some dynamics of movement, tension, maybe some harmony. And this is then what we can start playing with to start questioning, well, what's going on? What is this space? What's it like if people move in or out? Because that will start testing our boundaries, and it'll start helping us define what are our masks really about. Questions, comments here on what you're seeing here and what it looks like?
Hi, I have a question
Yeah.
about where the person wants to move.
Yeah.
How do we know? I mean, I think most often we don't really know, right? Where other people how they feel about us? Like, how do we determine, how can we determine that, where they go?
It's right there. It's not about how they feel about us. That's where they want to move. How do I feel about them? That's where I want them to move, okay? Now, the point is I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not now going to get this done where either my friend's going to move in or I'm going to keep pushing them out or I have to come up with a compromise. That's not what this is about. Because what this is showing are all the tensions I'm dealing with, okay? Here I have a relationship with this friend who's out there trying to get into my space, and I'm really trying to move them away. That already is going to affect our dynamic with each other. It's going to have me determine certain boundaries and masks and behaviors and patterns, okay? So it's more of feel into it, sense into it. Where is this person? Where do I want them to be? Do I want them to be further away, closer in, or right as they are? Where do I sense they want to be? Based on behaviors, actions, or whatever, do they want to be closer in, further away, or right where they want to be? It just takes a little bit of reflection. Now, because we did this sacred self-visualization, you may then get more of a sense of what are they getting closer or further away from. Okay. Does that help answer your question a little bit more?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, because right at this point, there's nothing we're supposed to solve. Okay, this is more about what's the situation on the table. Okay, you're just mapping it out. Then next, I'll show you. Okay, now what are some of our points of focus that we can work with? Okay, how you guys doing? It's about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, so we're definitely going over. So, and I will say to maybe an extra 30 minutes, all right? If any of you, like I said, need to leave, please feel free. You will get a recording, okay, so that you could catch up with the rest of it. Great, yes, so Helena, you have to go, that's fine. You'll get the recording, all right? I'm glad that you were able to join, and like I said, you're looking radiant, looking beautiful as always. Okay, so here's what I suggest. You could go, you know, take a screenshot of this or draw this on a piece of paper, all right, after the call, and sit down and map out for yourself, right? And by the way, you know, you could say, okay, so what's my life in general? Or even like say, what's my life at work? Or what's my life here or at home? You could do several versions of these maps, okay? Because we have so many relationships, all right? Map that out.
Could you show the map without your drawings, but with the helpers outside?
With the what?
With the definitions on the outside of the rings, but without yours.
Oh yeah. So this, right?
Like this. Yeah, perfect. Then I can make a screenshot.
Great. Yeah, then you can take a screenshot of that. Great. Excellent. Yeah.
All right.
And map it out. And then basically the first thing, what you want to do is start looking at what polarities are showing up. What's the tension, the push and the pull, okay? Last webinar, we looked at polarity. So just basically briefly, we're hardwired to move from danger to safety. If we get our way, we're gonna flee danger and search for safety and escape there, okay? But if life starts pushing us back towards danger, we're gonna cling to that safety and then fight against the danger. Or we might try to stop all movement together and just freeze up, okay? So in all of these relationships, we're gonna flee, fight, we're gonna search, we're cling, or we're gonna freeze, all right? So what we're looking at here are how are we affected by the map? Or when we focus on one relationship or another, you could look at, okay, so well, what's most fascinating here? What's interesting? And what are the tensions and what's the harmony here? So then what you could start to do is take a relationship, say that's here, and start moving it further, move it closer. See what happens. Ooh, what are the reactions? How are you affected? Move it away. How are you affected? Okay. So how are you affected, or how is the client affected? Okay, if you're working on yourself, it's how are you affected? If you're coaching and using this map as a tool, then how is the client affected? As you move different relationships closer or further from the sacred space, because you might start seeing these kinds of behaviors happen. What you're really looking for then is, what is the basic desire in the relationship, all right? And that might mean, what are they fighting for? What are they clinging to? Or what are they searching for? Don't worry if it's a polarity behavior, that's natural. And then also, what shifts in the person in different positions, okay? Maybe they relax more. Maybe they realize, oh, it's not so bad to have that person closer. Or it's really, 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 really bad. Like, stop, 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 stop. Don't get so close. I need you back. That's comfortable, all right? You can't talk about this stuff. You have to actually do it to test yourself or test the client to really get the visceral reactions. Then you can start making correspondences. Okay, so which relationships could actually learn from each other? Like, I'd love this relationship to move into my sacred space, but I get freaked out, or they get freaked out. But then there's this other relationship that's already very comfortably in my sacred space. Well, what's working there that they're in my sacred space? How can I then transfer that over to the other relationship? Or, you know what, there's some benefits to having this person outside that this relationship could learn from, so maybe I can send them out a little bit further from time to time, okay? It's a back and forth. What are the relationships teaching each other? Then you can also look at, what is the main thing going on that's affecting everything on the map, okay? So let's look back here. Where am I generally oriented? Towards sacred space or away from sacred space? Where are my relationships generally oriented? Towards or away? You can already start to see, like, what am I making priorities? What am I really shifting here? Any observations? Just take some stabs at it while you look at that map. Yeah, I'm hoping you can see it. Very well.
So coming in, you're asking for whether we see patterns here, or like
Yeah,
general?
or just like what in general strikes you there when you look at that. And it's not about judging me. It's just noticing what is happening in the picture. Yeah.
Well, oftentimes, like what you want and what the person, or where the person wants to move, is opposing each other.
Yeah.
Then work is is much closer to your sacred self than anything else.
Right.
You have this very particular friend on the outside of the border who really wants to be in your sacred space. I would wonder why, and why you even consider that person important.
Mm-hmm. Notice there's several people that want in my sacred space.
Right.
And there's only one thing I'm actually allowing into that space. And it's my work.
Uh-huh. So
I'm not allowing people in, I'm allowing my work in. So that already is kind of like, wow, we can get fascinated about that. What am I getting from my work? What's the benefits and the well-being I'm getting from my work that I'm not getting from people? Now that could be real or in my head. Do you understand? We haven't done the work to find out what's really in the space yet, okay? But I've made up some rules that the only real intimate thing allowed in my life is my work, and the rest can go out. Even I want somebody to maybe be my lover, they're still not in my sacred space, my work is. Do you see? Now this is not to criticize me, it's more to say, aha, interesting, fascinating, because I'm living a dynamic, okay? if I shift one thing, which is clearly define my sacred space and be at peace with it, it's going to shift all of these relationships. I might redraw that map and all these arrows will be very different, at least from my end. Do you understand? Anybody else want to make a comment there, or on what I'm saying here? Okay. Also notice lots of tension because we've got opposite arrows, but here's some harmony, right? It seems like both of us want the same thing, closer into my space. Now, there's a bit of a conflict there, like, well, maybe sometimes I think he doesn't want in, but at least we could focus on this side and say, well, what's it like when we both want the same thing? That creates a little bit of harmony, okay? So I just wanted to point a few of those things out, yeah? Now, finally then, what we can do is we can model one relationship onto another. So let's say I come in and say, I really want to work on my relationship with my dad, okay? Well, that's got a lot of history to it. And maybe there's a lot of hangups on both our ends. What other relationship might I be able to learn from that I could then transfer over into my relationship with my dad, right? And this is another thing we could discover, okay? Well, you know, if I say, I don't know if my dad's coming or going, well, I want my work in, it's really going pretty far away. Well, maybe it's easier for me to shift my relationship with my work and I can learn something from it about my sacred space, my boundaries. Then I can start transferring that over into my dad's relationship. It'll be easier. Instead of me trying to fix this relationship, I'm looking at what's the relationship I can work on that has the least amount of cost. Or for example, I need to send people away. Like, well, it might be easier to work on this friend than on this best friend if I need to send somebody away. Do you understand? This is of more low consequence to me. And this might be a great place to really learn about what's my boundary around sacred space, okay? But for here, if I try to do it with this best friend, that might make the relationship really turbulent. Whereas here, the guy is already pretty much out anyways. Well, sorry to say, he's kind of expendable. I might be able to do safer experimentation around my boundary here. I don't know if that sounds cruel and mean, but what I'm saying is, what's going to cost me the least where I can learn the same thing? Does this make sense, what I'm saying, around modeling from one relationship, transferring it over to the other? Which relationships are simpler and easier to shift instead of trying to fix the most important high-cost relationship I could have in my life? Does this make sense to you guys, what I'm saying? Or how's it sounding? Or just give me thumbs up if it's all okay for you.
I mean, it's your way of using that map, so it's okay. I would be like very much interested in the diverse projects that I have, or building sides of my life, you know? Like I have, at times I'm like, okay, I have at least 5 very important things and they're on different areas, so I can't really compare them. So they're all equally important, but how do they correlate and where are they in relation to my sacred self? So these things that could really help me organize my life better, understand myself better.
Exactly. So what we're looking at, or from that map, okay, are 5 things. What are the polarities? And then what are the masks? What are the boundaries? What's the sacred self? What's the sacred space? So I've just covered the polarities. And what I'm saying is, this is such a flexible tool. I mean, you can focus on this, that, or the other. It doesn't matter because, you know, with polarities, you're looking at what's the basic tension? What are the correspondences? How can you model one thing, transfer one thing onto the other? There's much more you can do. You don't even have to bother with that. What I'm saying is all of these are options. And this is the very important thing you must remember with emergent essence dynamics. You always have options. It's not about rules. I could do this, I could do that. It doesn't mean I have to cover all these bases, okay? So I'm just basically laying out all your options. So what do you do with masks? Well, what you want to do is explore the range of masks that the person has, okay? And they can use, by example, different relationships, okay? Like I said, each ring has its own set of masks. So what you want is for yourself, or if you're working with a client, have them neutralize any judgments about the mask. It's got a function. And remind them that every mask has a strength. Each mask enabled them to cultivate a strength. And then what you've got to watch out for is be very aware of any fear or false values controlling that mask. Particularly if they start getting into a clinging mode of, I have to have this mask is for this, and I have to have it. Well, fear might be controlling it. Now, there's nothing to fix yet. That's just an observation, okay? They may have a judgment about a mask where like, well, I have to go in, work, and I'm a taskmaster and I have to whip people into shape. And yet when I'm at home, I'm so loving with my children. I wish I could be loving with all my staff and employees, but if I do that, they're going to take advantage of me. And I really have to keep, you know, things in tip-top shape. But I hate that mask of being the taskmaster. Well, what's your strength in that mask? Again, neutralize the judgment. What's the strength in that? Well, I'm highly organized, I'm quick, I'm responsive, and I know when to draw a line. Okay, great. But I don't want to do that all the time. That does not mean you're going to do it all. You are not your mask, okay? You have a strength where you can be a taskmaster and draw lines and be very quick and effective in that. That's a mask you wear. Then you can take that mask off, you can put another mask on. You have to make people realize, and yourself, that masks are not permanent. Just like all the clothes you're wearing today are not stuck to your skin. Does that make sense? Thumbs up or down? Okay. Now what you want to do. So here, you know, masks. Okay, now put that sacred self in relationship to the mask. It's not that you want them to compete, you want them to relate. It's as if the mask is an extension of that sacred self. And when they come into relation, you want to see, well, what shifts in the person or the relationship? What is feeling resilient and genuine? Or what is not? If it's feeling in competition, then there's something amiss. Something is driven by fear. And that may be that the sacred self or sacred space is driven by fear, or the mask is driven by fear. Okay? So, welcome, Petra. You know, if you can mute if you've got background noise, but feel free to join in at any time to unmute and comment or give a question. Yeah, great. So what you want to do is put sacred self in relationship with your masks. It's not to reconcile them yet. It's just to feel what is resilient, what feels genuine, what feels not so genuine or resilient. Then you can start sorting through what those masks are. Well, which masks are essential? What are they useful for? Well, which masks have I been using that actually, now that I am feeling more of a resilient space here, what can I let go of? But what does it demand of me to let go of that? Or which masks could I use more regularly, and what will that demand of me? Any questions there on around exploring the masks? Some questions you could ask yourself might be, okay, so what are my essential masks? How are they useful? Which masks or which parts of the masks are serving me well? Even if I still judge the mask, what parts of those masks are serving me well? Which ones cultivated strengths? Then you could ask, well, so who am I already using those masks with? And then, you know, which ones could I afford to let go of? Or, and with whom? With whom could I either take on or let go of a mask? Which masks come from resilience or are built from resilience, and how is that done? Which masks were built from fear? How was that done? All right. Lots of, and even if it was built from fear, still, what was the strength that got cultivated? So start to separate fear, resilience, strength, mask, separate all that out. So it's just pure energy for what it is.
Yeah, I have a question there.
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused because I was thinking that every mask kind of is at least to one part born from fear. I would be interested in an example of a mask that's completely resilient. Like, aren't you always trying to keep yourself safe in some way through a mask?
Yeah, okay. So in a way, it's, yes, all masks are born from fear. Okay. Just like we do not function in the outside world completely naked, we wear clothes. Okay, so, you know, sometimes the weather doesn't permit that we be naked, so we need some layers of protection. But it doesn't mean that, the point is when the mask is built from fear and remains in fear, it's like, this jacket is who I am. And if you ever take that jacket off, I'm losing who I am. I'm identifying with the jacket. Okay. If I say, oh, I understand what this jacket does. It's a black jacket. It's made, you know, it's got a nice texture. It keeps me sort of warm. I don't have to cling to it. I can change the jacket and still know who I am on the inside as a resilient being, a permanent resilient being. And then this can augment me. Okay, that's when it's built from resilience. How does it augment me? As opposed to, like, I am the clothes that I wear, right? What was that expression of the suit makes the man or the man makes the suit, something like that. I mean, remember who you are. You don't have to identify with your coverings. You can create, once you get to know your resilient self, you can create new masks. This is what I'm meaning. Is think of it as degrees, shades of gray. I can have my pure light, and then I can put a filter on it and it changes color. Another filter, it changes color. Another filter, it changes color. The light is still the same. So masks are like filters. Does that help answer your question a little bit more, Amiel?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Think of them more like filters with functions, all right? The point is if we identify ourselves with the mask and forget the central being of who we are, that's where the mask is operating out of fear. I'm going to go through this a little bit more quickly so that I get it all done for you guys and we end on time here. Saying what I've said because we've got 15 minutes left. Now, you can also explore, what are these lines? What are these boundaries? What's your relationship to each boundary? So explore the strengths of each boundary and the resilience of each boundary. Meaning, be aware of if this boundary is driven by fear or false values. What's in control here? A way to test that is, okay, I have to have this boundary. Nobody can cross this line because such and such will happen. Okay, let's test it. Let it go. Let's see what happens when certain things start crossing that line. And when we ground you in resilience, we'll ask, are you still okay? Oh, I am okay. So how necessary is that boundary then? If we can let go of the fear, we actually start to understand the true function of the boundary, instead of it just being a protective measure that's hard and fast, all right? So what we want to do is start opening and closing the boundaries to see how they function, which is what I just described. And then start looking at which boundaries are guarded by fear, which boundaries are grounded in resilience. Now, when I say grounded in resilience, it doesn't mean that I let everybody pass through. I could resiliently say, no, I'm sorry, you don't pass, because I know what the boundary is all about. Also, boundaries guarded by fear could say, okay, oh, yeah, go ahead and pass. I don't want to challenge you. Could be the exact opposite. Resilience means I can stand my ground, feel okay and flexible with saying yes and no. Fear means I'm hardwired to say one way yes, one way no. It's very conditional, which means it's weak. The boundary is weak when driven by fear. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Do you guys follow what I'm saying there? The boundary
Yes,
is
yes.
fragile when driven by fear.
Yeah, it makes sense in relation to this one point we had at the very beginning, that all the masks we have are something in connection. Like all we are connects to something that we are, and understanding what we are in whole, then makes fear more relative and total, obviously.
Exactly. So the only way we're going to see how our boundaries function, why they're there, or what they're for, it's not to intellectualize about it. It's really start, you know, on your own, or if you're working with a coach, or if your coach is working with you, or just with a friend, start crossing those boundaries. Like I'll say to a client, okay, so here's your dad out here. Now we're moving in, moving in, moving in, moving in. Stop, 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 stop. Okay. Let's just put your dad right there with his face up to the line. What's it like? How are you feeling? What's feeling threatened? What's feeling fearful here? What's feeling okay? Because I'm not just going to say, oops, I'm sorry, I'll back him up. No, no, no. I want to find out what that boundary is about. Do you understand?
I think that as long as you search for who am I, you are still in the outer rings. Ideally, for me, ideally, in the very middle of everything is this having not to be anything.
Right.
So then it's just temperature. I can be a bitch and a super loving. I understand, or I feel that everything is inside and everything is congruent and
Yeah.
fluid. So it's like reconciling every conflict with myself. So there's no question left, who am I?
Yeah, okay. So what I need to do is move next to the sacred self and the sacred space, because that's what you're talking about is, okay, let's get an experience of the sacred self. Then let's return to boundaries, okay? Because, right, so when I'm presenting you something in a linear order, okay, here are polarities, here are masks, here are boundaries. It's not step 1, 2, 3. It's all of it together simultaneously at the same time. You can bounce around. There's a little bit of polarity now. Here's sacred self. Now let's go to boundary. Now let's go to sacred space, masks, and it's all organic, all right? So I need to say that up front. Please don't, I'm presenting it in a linear fashion. The way you work with it is it's not so linear, okay? You're right. If we only established from the outside in, we'd have no real clue what's going on. We have to also go inside to the sacred self, then return to the boundaries. Okay, so very good point you made, Kirsten. Thumbs up or thumbs down on what I just said there, Kirsten. So, okay. All right, very true. What's really important though is take a step away, look at the large map and say, how are all these boundaries working together? How are they actually allies to each other? All right. Even if some boundaries seem to be fighting against each other or conflicting, they are all trying to accomplish something. Start to look at how they're allies. Then you can start making adjustments from within your sacred self. So, and I would say that after visiting sacred self, returning to boundaries, you can start establishing some criteria and priorities of what these boundaries are and what they're for. So this helps you explore values, your sense of integrity, and your sense of fluidity from resilience, meaning I can have people jump rings depending on situations and conditions. It's not hard and fast here only, but also in order to set the boundaries, what are my demands? And what is my ability to say no without fear, without clinging, fighting, fleeing? It's just a simple no. No, I'm sorry. No, you don't cross that line. Oh, but I thought you were such a nice person. I thought you were a coach. I thought you were a meditator. Now you're just like a meanie. Now you're just like, you know, the meanest president in the world. Oh, how dare you? I thought you were my friend. No, it's just that we don't cross that line. And I'm okay with that. And I'm not losing any connection with you. Might be a poor example, I don't know. But we need to explore our ability to say no from a central resilient place. I don't have time to get into that in too much depth and detail, but I'm giving you an overview, okay? Maybe I'm gonna have to do a second webinar where I could demo some of this stuff. So looking at sacred self, what are you basically looking for? You want to anchor yourself in that sacred self, like through that meditation, okay? And just as you work through your sacred self, just be aware of little pangs of fear. Let them go, because sometimes fear might be pretending it's a sacred self. Stay grounded in resilience. There are other webinars previously where we showed you how to get grounded in resilience. From sacred self, you can start focusing on your relationship to vulnerability, intimacy, and well-being. Because this is you without mask. And so you can take everything away, you can clear the space, nobody's in my space. Now, what is it like to be intimate with myself and then with another person in well-being? And there are degrees, you'll find there are degrees, okay? We want to explore what are the attributes of this sacred self. So what really is sacred to me? It's not about what are my values. No, what is sacred? What's permanent? What's timeless? And how do those things feed my well-being? And then what's it like to expose that stuff outwards? How does it feel? Is it really that permanent, or am I clinging to it? Maybe there's still a little bit of fear involved. There's certain things that feel very sacred that it's okay to radiate, okay? Later I can get selective about who I radiate that to and to what degree. But what's it like to expose it? I need to get to know myself. It's not like I'm obligated to expose, but what's it like to expose? Then I can decide which facets of myself need to be kept sacred. It's not because I need from fear, it's just because that's what I want. And then what facets are really important to share, because I might discover there's certain facets of myself, like maybe my creativity, or my ability to be gentle, or my ability to, be compassionate. Well, I could share that. Whereas before, maybe I've been hiding it out of fear. So it can go both ways. Don't think of these things as good or bad. Then you can start putting your sacred self in relationship to those people on the map. And what shifts when you come in direct relationship with them from sacred self? What shifts in yourself? What shifts in them? This can be done in your imagination. What do you imagine? Okay, so when I reveal this, what happens over there? How are they affected? What happens to me? How am I affected? How does that affect our dynamic? And all the while, keep reinforcing the permanence of the sacred self. So you could experiment, put the mask on, take the mask off, try on a different mask, take it off, put it on again. But whether the mask is on or off, there are facets that are permanent in you. They don't disappear. I can be loving, and I can be all so transparent and vulnerable and loving with a bleeding heart, but then I can put on this mask of restraint. I'm still loving and everything. So I can, it's just a filter. It's just a filter of the degree of intimacy, okay? There's certain things that are never going away. Is this clear what I'm saying? When you understand the permanence of your sacred self, it has you attach less to a mask and put less importance on the identity it gives you. You can realize what is permanent in me can be always expressed through various filters, and I'm still authentic, meaning I'm acting according to source, my source. Comments there? Or a thumbs up to say it's okay. Okay. So then when we know sacred self, we can then explore sacred space. Let's define what that sacred space is and what are the values that emerge. And be aware of false values trying to control this space. Meaning, like as Kirsten said, I might be coming from outside myself, trying to define that space based on what I learned and what people told me. Come from the inside out and discover what values emerge now in this sacred space. I can recreate values here. And they don't have to be solid and concrete, okay? It can simply be qualities that exist in the sacred space. And one way you'll find out is by provoking people entering or exiting that space. Like, oh, this is a space of intimacy and truth and transparency, and this is where I have my best friend and my mother. And this is where we have strong connection, and this makes me feel whole and complete. All right, well, we're taking your mom out and your best friend out. Now what's going on? Oh, well, I feel like nothing. I feel so empty. Well, then maybe that was a false value of being so whole and complete and having a connection in a certain way. And you're identifying that through your mother and your best friend. I mean, if the qualities live in the sacred space, not in the people that are there. Is this clear? It's important to make that distinction. And then there are certain people you say, well, they'll never be allowed in. Or they'll be never. Well, how do you know? I'm not saying in real life bring them in. I'm saying in your imagination, bring them in and notice how you're affected. Okay? Then later you can take action and test things out to make a rearrangement of your map a reality. Right? When you explore opening and you closing the space, you start to know what actually keeps it sacred. So you notice what happens when people move closer in or further away. You start to notice, well, what's available when they're in? What's available when they're not? Well, who actually belongs here and who really is not allowed? Now that I've started to test and move things around, then I can start to know why. Why is somebody not allowed in here? Well, this person isn't allowed in there because they continually take advantage of me. And so if my space is built upon mutual respect or mutual sharing or fluidity, well, they'd be better out here where, you know, when they're out here, they can take advantage of me just fine because I haven't let them take so much of me. Do you understand? Here, they're getting everything and they're not doing a balance of return. So therefore, they don't belong there. As an example, okay? Just seeing a couple chats here. Yeah, okay, yes. Again, like if you need to leave, no problem. I'm gonna be wrapping up very, very soon. Once you know your sacred space, now you can start establishing the criteria and conditions of that space, meaning what does it demand of you to invite people in or move them out? Meaning, what does it take of me? Strength, courage, or heart, or what? Maybe it means I need to let a few things go in order to let a few people in. I need to change my beliefs around them. Or maybe I have to change my beliefs around someone to send them away, okay? The other thing is, what do you demand of them if they enter or stay? So think about it. I'm giving you the access code to my VIP room. So there are certain codes of behavior that need to happen here. If you're not going to follow those codes of behavior, well, then I'm sorry, I'm changing the code and you're locked out. And I need to be okay with that. And I need to be okay to demand that of them, whether that's actually spoken out loud or not. It's important that I know it because based on their actions and behavior, I know where they belong. What's really important here is what's the deal breaker? Meaning, what can actually never, ever happen in this space. In this space, it can happen here, here, or here, or here, but never here. Okay, that's what I mean by the deal breaker, all right? Now, what if somebody is in here and they break the deal? Fine, you send them out. Does that mean they're permanently banished? No, but you make them earn their way back in, and you're open to having them earn their way back in, but you also are very prudent and aware of what's the deal. Are they going to follow the deal or not? This is your space. You're the master of it. It doesn't mean you need to be defensive about it. It's just that's the way it is. Okay? Then even if you're interacting with people on these outer rings, how is there still a connection to that sacred space so that you're not losing a sense of intimacy and connection? There's always connection and intimacy. It's just by what degree and according to what conditions. You can have healthy relationship with everyone because all these levels are radiating out from sacred self. It's just up to you to define at what level are we interacting at. Any questions there? So what connects you to your sacred space despite any masks? Again, that is, I know who I am behind the mask. I know who I am behind the boundary or in front of the boundary. Anything to comment, question, or add here? Or is it all good? Just give me a thumbs up. Those are pretty much at the end. Good. So, no time for demos on this, but maybe I will make another special call or webinar where we could demo this and you could see how I can work organically through that. Remember that masks and boundaries enable us to move rigidly or fluidly in relationship. It depends on what we're connected to. If I attach too much to my masks and boundaries, I may be rigid. If I'm well connected to my sacred self, then I can be fluid with all masks and boundaries because I know they all radiate from that sacred self. Just remember that masks are facets of who you are. They are masks that you wear for all the roles that you play in your life. It is not all of who you are, but all your masks can accumulate into all the facets of who you are. So it's important not to attach to a mask too strongly or to identify your whole self through one mask, okay? What else? Don't think about boundaries and how to set them. Actually test them with yourself. Provoke yourself. Actively move people around on your map and see how it feels, okay? Or if you're working with somebody, if you're coaching them and using this as a coaching tool, even physically get in and out of their space. Say, okay, now I'm this person. See, put their face on my face. Now I'm moving in. Now I'm moving out. And notice how they react. You don't want them to talk about it. You want to provoke and react. That's how you get the true responsive information. When you're looking at your boundaries and experimenting with them, start to know your rules. Okay, so what are the rules I've set up? Now, break them in your mind. Break them and see what happens. Because by breaking your rules, you can start to truly define what the function is of those rules. Then you can start to be flexible with your rules. If you just put your rules up on a pedestal and under a little glass jar and say, here are my rules, I'll never, ever, ever break or change them, that can be false. They are in control of you instead of you control of them. You create your rules, understand your rules, why they're there, and then you'll know when and where to break them, and you'll know when and where to keep them. Rather than trying to be authentic, be congruent, meaning what you're thinking, feeling, and saying and doing all line up. I feel sad, therefore I'm saying I'm sad, I'm letting my body reflect the sadness. Instead of, oh, I'm okay, I am wearing my stiff upper lip. Oh no, I'm just fine. I mean, that can be incongruent if you believe in it, okay? I can't let them know that I'm sad. There's a difference to, I know I'm sad, I'm choosing not to tell you I'm sad, and I'm saying, really? Not having a great day, but I'm okay, I don't need any discussion about it, let's move on with the work. Really, I'm fine. Like, that is different than saying, oh, I'm just okay, right? And totally not revealing anything to myself. That's a very fine distinction. Or I have to pretend like I'm opening my heart and my soul to you, and I really don't want to, but otherwise they won't think I'm authentic. So I better, sacrifice myself for them, be as vulnerable as I can. That's not being authentic, because you're not being authentic to self, okay? Be congruent with what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. It's very important. Anybody want to challenge that or have any questions there, or is it thumbs up okay? Okay. Regularly connect to your sacred self. And if at all, if anything, just keep reinforcing its permanent presence within you. Also the feeling that it is permanent and timeless. That allows you to re-examine and challenge all your values and the rules and the conditions that you hold. But now you're challenging it from a resilient place. Resilient meaning, if I take this away, how am I still okay? If I take this on, how am I still okay? And then I can start to see, well, then what do I really want as opposed to what do I think I need? All right. And certain values I may have been clinging to, well, if I cling less and less and less and I realize I'm actually okay, well, maybe it's not even a value that I had in the first place. Maybe it got imposed on me, or maybe I'll recreate it into something else. Practice fluidity and flexibility along with firmness and accountability. That's a paradox that you can start to reconcile. So I want to be fluid and flexible with people, but as well, I need to be firm and hold them accountable and hold myself accountable. I'll make my demands. I don't have to be quick to make exceptions, but I can be open. But I'm also not going to be driven by guilt, shame, fear, or manipulation. I know myself. So we are more fluid in life when we know ourselves and become masters of our space, because we are the creators of the space we are in. We are the creators of all the relationships we interact in. We're co-creators in that. So know your end. And then you can start being fluid and flexible with others as they respond to you. Comments or questions on that summary, or on what you're taking away from the webinar? We're well over. Any final words there, or comments, or this is where I'd really love to hear from you on what you're taking away or what stands out. Okay, think about it. I'll come back to you in a second. Love to hear your final words. So I know Kirsten and Torsten, you took the courses. So here I'm giving you an overview, lots of concepts, lots of theories. What you need to do is practice, and what you need is supervised practice. And so this was a skill from module 3. It's a tool we use in module 3, where it's a way to amalgamate everything you've learned from previous modules. So in module 1, you're getting the foundation to build resilience, start to get to know how to neutralize fear and reactivity. And then in module 2, you get much more embodiment techniques, and you're learning how to work directly with those polarities that fight, flee, search, escape, and freeze, and cling. And you're learning how to work with strong resistance. And in module 3, it's like what this tool is doing, you're reconciling all those polarities with your inward essence, and then expanding your levels of consciousness. So it's in a far more integrated state. And we have many other tools aside from relationship rings that you learn in module 3. And then you can put this all together and learn how to reconcile conflict, where you're actually dissolving the polarities and the power games and the manipulation games, whether that's going inside yourself or outside with others. And then our newest course is facilitation and team dynamics, where you're managing multiple levels of these dynamics and creating resilience in a leadership capacity on many, many different levels. So our next module's coming up. Fingers crossed for Berlin in June. That we get some semblance of normalcy, that we can actually meet together. I do have a game plan in place where I will be experimenting doing module 1 in the virtual space. And I'm going to be experimenting with that this month. So you'll be hearing from me if I get that, once I get that organized. So that is an option as well, to learn module 1 in the virtual space. there's a part of me that still feels it needs to be done in the in-person group. Then we also, hopefully by fall, things start settling or easing up a bit, that we can do Module 1 in Paris and in Munich in October, okay? And then we have our conflict course in June, fingers crossed for that, and then November we have our facilitation course. If something happens with June, I'm just gonna move dates, okay? Or like I said, I'm working on creating how to do these courses in a virtual space. So, and then the next webinar is next week, next Wednesday. And this is working with our shadow. It's called Moving from Dark to Light, working with death's door and rebirth. This is a crucial part of the transformation. It's like, how do we work through breakdown and through breakthrough? How do we go through that process of breakdown, breakthrough, so that we're actually reabsorbing the dark into the light, or the light into the dark, right? So that we're reconciling ourselves with our essence. Because in a way, that's where we're in parallel heading now, where we're heading into so much uncertainty and chaos. How do we manage that? It's like moving through a death's door, ultimate test of resilience, creativity. So that registration is open now on the same registration site. I just only allow registration for one webinar at a time. That's open. So feel free to register for next week. And feel free to contact me. Visit our website, essence-dynamics.com. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter at EE Dynamics. Look at the YouTube channel. I'm releasing more videos as we go along. Contact me, Troy, at essence-dynamics. And I'm very glad that you came, for those of you listening to the recording, that you listened to the end. And for those of you participating live, I'm hoping that you're listening to the last half of the recording. Thank you also for the great turnout today. And what's one thing you're left with here, or what feels inspiring, or practical, or otherwise? Someone, anyone?
For me, it's the circles showing the relationship dynamics. So as EED is built all on the relationship, and this is a good way to make it visible.
Make it visible and make it tangible, yeah. Anyone else? Kirsten or Rivi?
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Like, yeah, we did the tool, and it comes alive when you coach on it, or you have conversations on it. But yeah, it's a great structure to reveal some dynamics and to find find different perspectives.
Great.
Like, yeah.
That's really what it's meant for. It's not meant as a map that you have to suddenly solve it, okay? It's more of, it gives you a lot of illumination, and you start, it's like a constellation. You start shifting things around, and you see always how it affects you and what new insights come from that. The last thing then you can do is you can then start taking action and really establishing for yourself, okay, now from what I've learned, what's my new level of clarity, my new sense of integrity, and what will reinforce that level in myself? So then if I've decided to set some new boundaries, well, what's the first action I can take to do that? What's the easiest and least consequential action I can do to start setting those boundaries? And if I do that, what gets released and what is reinforced in myself? And then slowly, you know, you can start redefining your whole map. So, and what I want to say to everyone listening is, go home, use that tool. I mean, you're at home, but go back through the webinar and through the recording and take screenshots of the different points, and know that all of that is just options of what you can look at and focus on. You don't have to focus on everything. And know that all of this stuff interrelates: your masks, your boundaries, sacred space, sacred self, and they all contribute into the various dynamics and polarities you're experiencing. Go back to the map. once in a while. Shift it around. Focus here, focus there. Let it be completely organic. It's a tool that gives you some structure with total freedom. That's what I want to say. And then please, send me your feedback, comments, go use it and come back to me. And if you guys really would love to see more of a demo and a debrief on using this specifically, let me know and I can create that in the coming weeks. So to everyone, again, thank you so much. And we're on again next week on April 8th. We will be on every week for the month of April and May on various topics. And so in the meantime, keep resilient, keep creative, keep feeding your well-being, and experiment with your masks and getting to know your sacred self. Thank you, everyone.